This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. It's Alex here from My Forever Family. Welcome to today's webinar with Danielle Draper, and today, very important one, self-care for
Conference will
parents.
now be recorded.
So I can see we've got lots of our regular.
Oh, sorry,
And
Alex,
you'll
I
all
just muted everything to avoid the feedback.
be back. A lot of
But maybe we
feedback.
can get everybody that's not talking to mute themselves just to stop that feedback happening. There you go, Alex,
That's
you're good to go.
better. Good morning, everybody. I don't know how much you heard before. I just wanted to quickly say I am working on the surveys for these webinars. I've had some struggles with SurveyMonkey, but I think I've had it sorted out today. So just if you could just, I'll let you know when I send out the surveys, and if you could check your spam folder, because that's where mine have all been going, and I didn't realize, I just thought it was not working, but they were all sitting in my spam folder. But have a great session this morning. Let's make it fun. Let's make it interactive. This is a really important one. Looking after yourself is such an important factor when you're looking after little people. Thanks, Danielle.
Lovely. Okay, so basically I've popped everyone on mute, and if you wanted to say something, just unmute yourself or pop me a message in the chat panel and I can let you talk. Just it prevents the feedback and the muffly noise of everybody's background while we get going. Okay, so today we're going to talk about self-care and what that actually means for all of us. And I might preface from the beginning, if I was actually engaging in self-care, I might not be so scratchy today. So I am apologising in advance for my scratchy voice and possibly some intermittent coughing as I go through. But starting from the beginning about what self-care is, it really is something that we do intentionally. So, often we engage in nice things here and there because somebody gave us a gift or something like that. But self-care is actually something that we do intentionally for ourselves to take care of our mental health, emotional and physical health. It's personal, and the way we approach it is different to each other. But basically everything that we do is to better your well-being. It's not selfish, and it's not only taking care of yourself, but it's about knowing what we need to do to take better care of ourselves and in turn take care of others. And I like the little the metaphor about you can't pour from an empty cup, which is so true. And I think in my position as the director of an organisation and having a number of staff members and things being chaotic and busy at the moment and flights going here and there, I was pushing myself a little, and I was thinking this morning on my way here that I can't be what I need to be for the rest of my team if I don't actually manage these flu symptoms. Like I said to Alex, I'm calling them flu symptoms because I'm not actually willing to give in to it actually being sick yet. So we'll move on and look at the domains of self-care and what this means for us. So we've got, our emotional load, and being a carer, you've got an enormous emotional load to take care of these little people that have significant trauma histories. So engaging in emotional self-care is to help us understand ourselves more, become more resilient, and develop positive relationships. And when we respond to our own emotional needs, we build a greater sense of compassion, kindness, and love for ourselves and for others. There's a fantastic social worker and researcher, Brené Brown. She is actually touring Australia in July, which is very exciting. But she's from Houston in Texas, and she has some great information. So she does some TED Talks. There's a particular TED Talk on vulnerability, and it's a really interesting listen in terms of thinking about actually loving who we are as a person and being able to respond to ourselves and allowing ourselves to be a little vulnerable before and putting ourselves out there, so then we're actually able to think about others and how we can care for others. We need some physical self-care, so acts that benefit our individual health and nutritional needs. So things like that as you're exercising, even if it's a brief walk, but eating well. And when we do those things, it boosts our self-esteem and lifts our energy levels. Spiritual self-care is about our values and our beliefs and things that give you life meaning. It doesn't, I mean, if you do attend church or if you are engaged in the church, that's certainly something that you can do to fulfill your spiritual well-being. For others, it may be thinking about what's important to you, and if your sense of spiritual well-being is about your values and the importance of family, engaging in the importance of family and adding meaning to your life through that way, but building a sense of belonging and connecting to other things that are bigger than just us. Mental self-care. So that involves finding the balance between stimulating your mind and giving your mind a break. And sometimes we do need to just switch off and give ourselves a bit of a mental break. And I think, at times around our lunch table, we talk about what kinds of books we're reading or what kinds of TV we're watching. And I would have to say that I did engage in a lot of time watching Married at First Sight. And when I read books, they're usually quite trashy. And I think, though, after being switched on for so much of the day, and I lecture at the university in social work as well, and the reading and talking consistently all day about theory and practice, by the time I go home, the actual zoning out on the couch is absolutely perfectly appropriate to give ourselves a mental health break. So also engaging in new learning or creativity or things like that, or reading articles if that's what you're interested in, that can also add to our sense of self as well. In relation to the social, engaging in social self-care is about relationships and being in relationships with people and assisting them to create a sense of belonging and acceptance. And I guess there's quite a few theorists that tell us the opposite to addiction and significant mental health issues is actually connection, and it's coming out quite a lot more recently across the sector that engaging and connecting with people is actually the antidote to a lot of different social issues. So it's important to keep you mentally healthy and physically well, and to be able to see a child reach their full potential, regardless of what that might be. When we're not well and when we're not able to sustain ourselves, the opposite to being emotionally well is feeling feelings of resentment and disconnection and fear. And we do need to access support at that time. And that might be through getting a respite break from the child that you're caring for, or it might be getting some support from professionals, or even just having that cup of tea and a bickie with your friend gives us that, extra bit of recharge to be able to care from a compassionate and empathic kind of place then. Just going to adjust my monitor a little, apologies. So when I'm going to refer to respite breaks a few times throughout our discussion this morning, and I'm not just talking about going on planned respite where children go away for a weekend or the holidays or things like that. I'm talking about all sorts of kinds of respite, even just when kids go to school, that it's kind of like, oh, well, they're at school, so we need to rush around, do the shopping and their house cleaning and all of those kinds of things. But it is also an opportunity to get some planned respite for yourself in, to be able to get some downtime in between having children in your care. Going back to that analogy about filling the cup, whilst we have a cup, so do the kids that we care for. And when we're not filling our own cup, we end up with compassion fatigue and some struggles. And Dan Hughes also refers to the term blocked care. That can also play a role if you're working from an empty cup as well. So thinking about this cup analogy, if you imagine that every child also has a cup that needs to be filled with affection, love, and security and attention. Some seem to have a full cup most of the time, or they know good ways to get a refill. So for our own children, perhaps, or children that don't have a trauma history, that they know when they're a bit tired, they can come in for a cuddle, or you can help get them some rest, or you can give them a meal and things change. But most children get a little nervous when their cup gets near empty. And for a lot of the kids that are coming into care, their cup is pretty empty. So what fills a child's cup? We've talked a bit in the previous webinars about play and the importance of play and creating play in a lot of different situations that you're in with the child. Friendship. So a lot of the kids that we work with and care for don't have a lot of friends or don't have a lot of connection with friends. So working on building up relationships for those children. Having some one-on-one time, that might be just sitting and having a story time at night. Love and affection, connection, succeeding, being able to do something well, or doing what they love to do or what they choose to do. So having extra interests and activities where they can. Things that empty that cup, and it's the same for all of us, not just children, with stress and strain, rejection, and I talked the other day about unconditional positive regard and minimizing the amount of rejection that children feel. But it's also the same for us, when we've got children coming to us, and if you're doing everything you possibly can, but they have some kind of attachment disorder, that feeling of rejection, of doing something, thinking you're doing it well, and then that child rejects, that can be, it's going to impact on how full our cup is. Feeling lonely and isolated, and I think, this is an additional issue for you as carers. Already as a parent, as a stay-at-home parent, it can be lonely and isolating if you're not part of a networked group. For carers, there's an added stress because the children that you're caring for are not like your friends' children or people down the road's children. They have a whole lot of different needs. So that feeling of loneliness and isolation, particularly regional remote carers, or if you're working and caring at night and not able to network with other carers or support groups. Yelling and punishment, obviously this impacts children, but it also impacts carers as well, with children are escalating, feeling of failure, feeling of tiredness, and doing what they're forced to do or they hate to do, which is probably most things really. For children, I think any sign of a chore fits into that. But they're the kinds of things that empty the cup. And while this slide is particularly about what fills up a child's cup and what empties the child's cup, it's absolutely relevant for children, but it's also relevant for you as carer. Okay, so in addition to thinking about just the cup analogy and what that looks like, we also have secondary trauma. So being in a place of empathy versus sympathy puts us in a situation where we're feeling with a child. And if that child is making disclosures, they're telling you information about their experience, they're triggered by different things. It might be that they're suddenly triggered by going in the bathroom or having a bath, and they're triggered by different foods or smells. And if they start to disclose to you about what has happened for them, then there's that sense of feeling and feeling what the child has experienced, and that weighty feel of hearing and understanding that. That is a sense of secondary trauma. So it is actually quite traumatizing for you as carers. I was out talking to a prospective carer interstate actually, and we were sitting down, and it was a relative carer, and I was asking her if she understood what had happened for the child or children in this case, and she said, I don't want to know, it would just make me too sad. And I said to her, it's actually really important that you know something about what's happened for the children, because it will help you understand them and understand their behaviours when they occur. So for these particular children, they had been quite severely physically abused, and one had many aged fractures. And she said, I think they might have seen a bit of violence, but I don't really know, and I don't want to know. I said, well, actually, we need to actually go further into this. You need to know what's happened, because it's really about being able to understand for them. And it's not about having clear details about what's happened, but knowing that there's a lot of healed injuries for this child, that day-to-day things are going to impact him and the way that he responds, and not knowing that she may do something that the child could really react to and put themselves both in harm's way. Now, in saying that, whilst I can understand that she may not want to know, we have this information, so it is actually important to be on top of that. There are lots of children that we don't actually know what has happened for them, and even these children, we're never going to know the full extent of what's happened for them, and we can just do the best with what we have. However, it is likely that the more safe a child feels, the more information they start sharing about what's happened for them. And this can cause compassion fatigue, because the carer becomes so drained and exhausted by the child's behaviours that there's real psychological change in the brain, and it makes it really hard for the carer to connect with the child or access the empathy for that child, because we know that the children that we have or work with have really significant behaviours that are related to their experience. Compassion fatigue is also researched by Dan Hughes, and it's called blocked care, and that's when lots of things are going on for that child, but we reach this place of I just can't be engaged in that. It also turns into a place of placing responsibility for the behaviour back on the child, and or back on a symptomology. So instead of understanding the trauma and being engaged in the trauma, we tend to go, well, that child is bad because they have ADHD, or they have ODD, or any of the other letters of the alphabet that give a child responsibility for the level of behaviour, instead of understanding where that's come from. And it's a really tricky space to be in. Compassion fatigue and reaching those levels of compassion fatigue really need some kind of intervention. And that's in terms of thinking about self-care, that's when we need to think about our own level of wellness and getting some support and help for that. Okay, so here's some indicators about secondary trauma, and these ones come from the ACF, so the Australian Childhood Foundation. So this kind of table, I'm not sure how well people can see that on their devices, but the slides will be available afterwards. This looks at what some of the physical feelings might be personally. I've got 3 different columns: personal, professional, and organisational. But if we just look at our personal and professional, because I guess, you know, as a carer, you're in the personal space, but as part of a team with a non-government organisation or with facts, there's also a professional self involved in caring as well. So physically, we have fatigue, could be hypervigilance. And we talked the other day in terms of that window of tolerance. Hypervigilance is going right up to that above, outside of the window of tolerance. So really looking and constantly trying to find the next bit of information that supports our state of awareness. It impacts our immune system. So this is when we tend to get quite sick. We also have a rapid heartbeat, and our breathing changes as well. The more shallow our breathing is, instead of breathing right down into our belly and getting some really deep breaths, the more shallow our breathing is, the less likely we are to be able to get out the cortisol that's going around in our body. Impacts our sleep and also our appetite. In terms of our senses, we can get flashbacks as well. So you might find yourself preoccupied around what's actually what a child said to you, or build a picture in your mind of the information the child's given you, and then that picture keeps coming back. Emotionally, we can feel powerless. We also can feel anxiety. We can feel guilt over our ability to protect. Fear, sadness, we can shut down. Some people end up with homelessness, and mistrust. And then in terms of our cognition, we start thinking our self-doubt, isolate from friends, and loss of interest in a range of tasks, hobbies, and life. So I'm just going to excuse myself for a minute. And then reflectively, we can decrease our sense of self-esteem and questioning our core beliefs. So this is, these are all different indicators of not only trauma, and like you might experience these after being in a car accident or a single incident trauma or multiple traumas, but then we can also feel all of these symptoms just by hearing or seeing the trauma play out in the children that you're caring for. Professionally, can be a lack of connection, use of negative coping mechanisms, so that can lead to addiction or difficulty in switching off. We can disassociate from what's going on, lack of satisfaction with what you're doing, and diminished empathy. And that's really coming back into that blocked care as well. We can project, countertransfer, there's increased mistakes and withdrawal from colleagues. We can have reduced reflective capacity, poor communication, and decreased confidence in setting perfectionist standards. So you can see how, you know, this might relate to a workplace if there's like particular stresses in a workplace, but also just in relating to you caring for children, how that can impact your ability to be engaged in the care team or the family team that's working around the child, or personally in terms of what can really impact your sense of self and what's going on for you. Okay. So that was all the heavy stuff. How do we fix it? How do we help each other and help ourselves? We need some time out. So whether that is just going in and having a bath, or just taking that little bit of space wherever you can get it, after bedtime, before getting up time, after a feed in the middle of the night, for a little bit before trying to get yourself back to sleep. Just taking that little bit of time out that you have your own space. Having a brain break. So I refer to watching trash TV as a brain break, because I think it's just that little opportunity to switch off and not actually need to account for that. We need to think about how long do we need, because 10 to 15 minutes more frequently could actually be as useful as a whole weekend or 2 weeks. If we actually practiced quality time out or something that's helping us get a bit of a brain break consistently, then we tend to require less of the whole weekend or the 2 weeks to kind of get things back on track. Often, being caregivers, you put yourself last. anyway, because everybody's needs are prioritized above yours. And by the time you've met everybody else's needs, there's nothing left in the cup. So it's really thinking about how can you keep your cup at least half full all of the time, because if you're sharing it everywhere, then you're going to run out. So what can you do regularly to put things in place? Casual babysitting. So having somebody come in to babysit, just even if it's for date night, a couple of hours in the week, but actually having them come into the child's environment can actually minimise children's anxiety. Often with respite, if respite happens at the point of crisis, a child's picked up, they're taken off to a respite carer who is undoubtedly lovely and able to give them a fantastic break. But the anxiety for the child of coming home, seeing somebody pick them up, packing a bag, going somewhere else, can actually trigger them in terms of their level of security. So for you, maybe all of the hard work that you've put in to developing that bond and that sense of security and sense of safety can actually be eroded just by that child being picked up and taken to respite for a weekend, which then makes it really hard for when they get home and rebuilding that sense of trust, particularly if it's early on. So having somebody come in may be a better option, or if you've got other family members that can be assessed and come in and help you out rather than the children going off somewhere else, it may actually be better for you also in the long run in terms of confidence. Kids also need a break. You know, we can't be on each other 24/7. I would have to say though, for the under 18 months, they would probably like to be strapped to you 24/7 until they're 5. So obviously little bubbas aren't going to need to be very close and don't necessarily manage well with a break. But even just going to school for the day is time for them to learn new connections in the safety of a different environment. And self-care prevents family disruption and further trauma for all concerned. We don't want to get to that point where everything is so overwhelming that we end up flipping a lid ourselves, and then everybody kind of scatters, and then there's actually more repair work afterwards to pull us all back together. So we do have a webinar on the 31st of May on therapeutic parenting, and I'm going to bring this same slide up then. But why I wanted to bring it in today was just to exemplify that bottom foundational level of therapeutic parenting is about being empathetic and also engaging in self-care. Because if we don't have a cup, we can't actually, if we don't have the cup and we don't have it pretty well near full, it makes it really hard to then work on all of the other layers of therapeutic parenting, and we end up being quite reflexive and responding in a reflexive way instead of a very planned and calculated way. I've got a little example from the weekend. I was going to another part of the state, and I was going down there to do an assessment, and had some little people that were in our office for their family visit, and a 2 and a 3-year-old that needed to be returned to a regional area in the evening, and I was going to that place. So I put my hand up and said, "Oh, it's okay. I'll take them back," instead of the worker that had been on with them all day. So we had some plans, and I started engaging with them at lunchtime, so they got to know who I was, and we played some games, and I had my very melodical uppy downy voice on at lunchtime. Every time they looked at me, I smiled and was 100% engaged in what they were doing. And then I went and did my thing. They went and did their thing, and then they come back, and as soon as they walked in the door again, I was very gushy with "So lovely to see you again." And then their other worker drove them to the airport and I met them there again. And again, I had to have my total game on 100%. There again, very melodical. And I had a bit of a plan to get from the doorway of the airport down to the gate lounge and then on the plane. So thinking 2 and 3-year-old with significant trauma, my whole period of time with them, I was channeling Mary Poppins. So all day I was thinking, okay, I've got to get down there. I've got to do this. I've got to check into the airport. I've got to check into the hotel. I've got this preparation to do before the next day. And normally on every domestic flight, I would be working on something, but I kept having to remind myself that I needed to be 100% there for that period of time that I had those children. So preparing myself during the day to just be in that zone with those children for those hours, to give them the best possible experience, but also to be able to regulate and contain their behaviour, given we were getting on a very little plane to go somewhere and they'd had a very long and hard day engaging in their family visit. So consequently, scratchy voice by the end and probably not enough self-care in advance to put myself ready for that particular event for the weekend, but an example nonetheless. Okay, so in terms of some examples, some concrete examples about how we can build self-care, just a minute.
Danielle, you need to go and look after yourself.
Thanks, Alex. I do indeed. I tried yesterday afternoon having a little time out. Okay, so how can we do this? What's on my to-do list tonight? Having an indulgent, lengthy bath. Bath is good. So being surrounded by water, warm water, is regulatory. So we can get a lot physically from having a bath. I would even recommend putting a bit of lavender in there, a bit of magnesium, Epsom salts, can really help us physically repair. Taking regular planned brain breaks. So if you're going to commit to a TV series, commit to the TV series. Know that it's on at that time every night. Schedule it and be 100% breaking with your brain in that time. Making some time out for a period of quiet reflection and planning. I think my way of doing this is scheduling that morning coffee. So just having a coffee by myself and thinking about what do I have to get through for that day. And often I force myself to get up, particularly on the weekend before the kids. So I've got that little bit of space just to engage in a quiet coffee on my own. It might be patting the dog at the same time for some regulation, but just that little quiet space to think about what's actually going to happen. Having a supportive friend. We all need a supportive friend and we all need to be able to vent to them. And it needs to be that little space that's entirely confidential and supportive and will accept you for who you are, and you can engage in that. Using mindfulness and meditation techniques. Some people find colouring in is useful and mindful. Sometimes things like just thinking about 5 things that you can see, or 5 things that you can hear, or 5 things that you can feel with your feet, 5 things that you can taste, and 5 things that you can just touch, just being in your space. So what mindfulness and meditation really are about is being centered in that moment, in that space. Reading a good book. I think an amazing form of therapy is a good book and a hammock, because that swinging is great for our vestibular system. Having hobbies. Often when you take on children or when you have children, our hobbies tend to go out the window. But being able to plan hobbies and being able to do that is actually really useful for us in terms of filling our cup back up. Taking time to exercise, whether that's walking or swimming. Exercise is not my friend, but I probably need to make friends with exercise more frequently. Spending time in the garden. So any of you gardeners would know that you feel better when you're getting enough to spending some time in the garden. It's some heavy body work. and embracing nature, going out, getting a walk outside, looking at the clouds, things like that help us. Sometimes we can't do self-care as an individual because you'll have commitments and people in your house and lots of things going on. So we have our emotional watching things as a family, so doing activities together as a family to meet the emotional needs, watching a good movie together, writing positive thoughts. When I lived in Japan, my host mum used to put a little post-it note in my lunch each day. That was just a nice thought or something that she'd been thinking about me. Verbalizing and talking about feelings, saying I love you, having a sing-along, telling jokes. The drawing self-portraits is a different one I can come back to. Mental, so reading together, finding shapes in the clouds, practicing belly breathing. The other one there is that's good is blowing bubbles together. I've talked about that before. Going on walks to find new things, so treasure hunts, making a vision board, make mindfulness jars. So that's a jar with pieces of paper in it that when you pull it out, it's got a new activity that you can do that's mindful, and play strength games like memory. So if you've got those memory cards that you can lay out and play with children, they love it. Physical, dancing, bike riding, hiking, playing ball, roller skating, going to the pool, even just the Wii Fit in the lounge room or some of those other games. Being practical, so cleaning up, going through toys, assigning chores, making lists together, doing budgets, having routines are all good ways for family self-care because it keeps us on track. And if you think about family self-care in the way that we just run our day-to-day lives, having routines, things keep us on track and keep predictability and consistency in our lives. Spiritual. So the first thing here is about a gratitude list. A lot of the children that I am doing therapy with at the moment, I actually get them to think about every morning. They need to tell their mum or the carer something that they're grateful for or two things that they're grateful for. And what that does, it actually helps rewire our brains where we can think from a gratitude space. So if you have to think the first day, it's not too hard. You can think of a couple of things that you're grateful for. The second day, might take a little bit longer, but you can think of a couple of things. The third day, it'll take a little bit longer, but you can pull up another couple of things. But by the fourth day, our brain's actually rewiring and it starts scanning our environment for those things in advance. So our brain starts working in the background to generate those things. So the next day it's a little bit easier and then a little bit easier. So then if you can think about the fact that your brain in the background is scanning your world for things that you're grateful for, it's actually shifting from a reactive environment into an environment of feeling grateful. So having a discussion each morning on the way to school or something like that about what is it that you're grateful for actually changes the way that your brain processes and thinks throughout the day. Having positive self-talk, telling ourselves that we're doing well is a great thing. And if you as carers can start having that positive self-talk that's loud on the outside, that actually encourages children to do something similar. And then social, having those plays in the park, catching up with other carers or friends, or having time with other people to network and join together. Okay, so in terms of connecting, we need to think about not only connecting with others and thinking about your network of people that you have in your circle, but also knowing that there's other people out there that can help you connect. The carer reference groups, using the My Forever Family Carer support line. There's other Facebook groups. You may not know of things in your actual area, but there are other groups in your area, and using your family and friends. So when you come into caring, you'll get to an opportunity, hopefully, to develop a new set of relationships with other people in a similar situation to you. But hopefully prior to coming into caring, you had an established friendship group or somebody that's on the other end of the phone that can hear you, or a family member that is able to engage with you and talk through things as you need to, because connection is that antidote to all sorts of other issues that we end up in, particularly thinking about that issue of blocked care. Okay, so now I'm going to put it out to you. If you've got any questions about anything that I've said, I haven't had any kind of chat throughout today, so anybody's got anything that they wanted to ask? I'm going to unmute everybody, so there is a free-for-all. There might be a bit of background noise, but if there is anybody that had any questions, oops, my mouse in the wrong spot. Yeah, please do speak up, or if there's anything that stood out for you or was new or different, please let me know. That's some background noise. Okay, so I don't have any questions coming through. I've just popped the mute back on because it seems like there's some background noise for some people. You can unmute yourself at any time. Alex, did you have anything that you wanted to hop in and say at this point? I might have lost Alex as well. Okay.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Yeah, just from our perspective, I just wanted to reiterate to everybody that, you know, part of our role at My Forever Family is supporting our carers. And so, you know, that's why we are putting on these webinars. That's why we run a lot of the training courses. We've got a lot of material up on our website for people to access. And of course, we've got our carer support line, which is available from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. We've got social media. We've got, you know, a lot of stuff because we understand how important it is to support carers in the work that they're doing. And it can be incredibly difficult and stressful. And we just want to make sure that everybody does feel like they've got an avenue of support with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we do have the roadshows currently going around the Western region, where there is that opportunity to tap into support when they're in your area, and there are more to come over for the rest of the year, travelling around the state. So it's worth looking out for when they are in your area, but keeping in touch with My Forever Family so you know what is going on, because I do find that the face-to-face training, and there's one currently happening now in Dubbo, there's lots of interaction, and we can get some really good ideas from those, and also just being part of a group and discussing with others. Okay, I've got a little comment in here. Yeah, it is a lot of trouble. So Heather's just saying that she's enjoying the webinars, but having a little trouble putting these self-care ideas into action. And I suppose it's one step at a time, and it
I
is one step at a
understand.
time.
Yep.
Yes. Speaking
This
from
is
that place,
Heather. This is a great start by coming in and joining us on these webinars. This is definitely a great start.
Yeah, it is. And I think from the self-care perspective, I think, we have all these different notions of what um, self-care is, or we think about, the big holiday or something like that. And really, I guess if there's any point that I can really stress from today, it's about the little things regularly that help us feel better. And that might be just, keeping a good bedtime and getting good sleep for a bit, just to help us with our self-care. Um, okay, so I might wrap up now then. And that there's no other comments. I do want to flag that the next webinar is on the 31st, so Friday the 31st of May, and we will be talking about therapeutic parenting, and it's definitely a good one to tune into because it's really about getting some of those practical examples of what's happening for kids and how we can help really move them forward and shift in a positive framework. Okay, did you want to add anything, Alex, before I turn the recording off?
No, I just wanted to say go and have some, I don't know, healthy food and some rest and
Yes,
some cold
yes,
medication.
indeed.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody.